The island of Saipan lay under a heavy tropical night, thick with humidity and tension. June 17, 1944, was drawing toward midnight, and the shoreline still smelled of salt, smoke, and freshly turned earth. The American Marines had been ashore for days, carving a fragile foothold into the sand and coral. Every meter of ground was paid for with exhaustion, discipline, and fear that never fully left the body. Along the beachhead, the defenses were quiet but alive. Shallow foxholes cut into the sand formed a broken line of resistance. Fields of fire overlapped carefully, planned during daylight with maps, hand signals, and experience earned on earlier islands. Anti-tank guns were dug and low. Rocket teams waited in shadows. Sherman tanks rested hull down, engines silent, crews alert. Nothing moved without purpose, not even breathing. Beyond the American lines, the Japanese command prepared something desperate. The 9th Tank Regiment had been ordered to strike hard and fast, to crush the beachhead in a single night blow. 37 light tanks, Type 95, gathered inland under cover of darkness. Their armor was thin, their guns small, but their crews were trained to press forward without hesitation. They were not meant to survive. They were meant to break the enemy line. As the night deepened, the island seemed to hold its breath. Insects buzzed in the tall grass. Waves rolled in softly, unaware of what was about to happen. Marines checked their weapons again, hands steady, minds racing. The quiet felt unnatural, like a pause before a storm that everyone sensed, but no one could see. Then the sky cracked open with light. Star shells burst overhead, blooming white and cold against the black sky. Shadows snapped into sharp focus. Palm trees, wrecked vehicles, and stretches of sand were suddenly exposed. The illumination revealed movement inland, dark shapes rolling forward with a metallic growl that carried across the beach. The tanks were coming. Tracks churned soil and crushed brush as the Japanese armor advanced toward the American positions. The sound grew louder, heavier, impossible to ignore. Each machine moved with grim intent, engines straining, crews sealed inside steel that rattled with every uneven step forward. The attack had begun, and there would be no turning back. On the beachhead, Marines tightened their grips and waited. Weapons were raised, but not yet fired. Orders had been drilled into muscle memory. Let them come closer. Let them enter the kill zone. Every second stretched thin, filled with the pounding of engines and the knowledge that once the shooting started, the night would explode into chaos. The first tank crossed into the open sand, its silhouette clear under the artificial stars. Another followed, then another. The line of armor pushed forward, confident in mass and momentum. The defenders stayed hidden, hearts racing, timing everything down to instinct. The island of Saipan was no longer silent. It was alive with anticipation, standing on the edge of violence, seconds away from a clash that would decide the fate of steel, men, and the fragile strip of land between the sea and the jungle. The night had only just begun. The first shots shattered the stillness like breaking glass. Anti-tank guns roared from their hidden positions, their flashes briefly overpowering the pale glow of the star shells. Rockets streaked forward, leaving short trails of fire before slamming into steel. The beachhead erupted into noise, heat, and motion all at once. Japanese tanks pushed on despite the fire. Some were hit and kept moving, armor scarred but engines still running. Others stopped suddenly, tracks broken or turrets frozen at odd angles. Burning fuel spilled into the sand, sending dark smoke twisting upward, mixing with the artificial light above. The smell of scorched metal and oil spread quickly, thick and choking. Marine rocket teams moved with rehearsed precision. They stayed low, crawling from foxhole to foxhole, using wreckage and shell craters as cover. Each advance was measured, time between explosions and gunfire. When a target filled their sights, they fired without hesitation. Shaped charge warheads struck weak points, punching through armor that had never been designed to face such weapons. Some tanks broke through the first line and pressed dangerously close. Their machine guns sprayed sand and steel fragments, tearing through empty positions and ripping apart anything left exposed. Tracer rounds cut bright lines through the darkness. The beach became a shifting maze of light and shadow, where distance was hard to judge and danger came from every direction. American Sherman tanks joined the fight, engines roaring to life as they rolled forward from concealed positions. Their larger guns spoke with authority, each shot echoing across the shoreline. At close range, the difference in power was undeniable. Type 95 tanks burst apart under direct hits, turrets blown open, hulls torn and burning. Still, the Japanese advance did not stop all at once. Isolated tanks continued forward, driven by orders and resolve rather than logic. Some plunged straight into concentrated fire. Others veered off course, colliding with wrecks or sinking into soft sand. The battlefield grew crowded with twisted metal, flames, and the unmoving shapes of machines that would never move again. Above it all, star shells kept blooming and fading, revealing new threats with each flare. Every burst of light reset the battlefield, exposing survivors, wreckage, and fresh angles of attack. There was no safe darkness, only moments of concealment before the sky betrayed everything again. By the middle of the night, the sound of engines had thinned. The attack was slowing, not from lack of intent, but from loss. One by one, tanks disappeared into fire or silence. The 9th Tank Regiment was being dismantled in fragments, each destroyed vehicle another piece gone forever. Yet the danger had not fully passed. A few machines still moved in the distance, their silhouettes wavering through smoke and light. The Marines remained in position, alert and tense, knowing that the most dangerous moments often came when victory seemed close. The beachhead held, battered but unbroken, as the night pressed on toward its most violent hours. As the battle tightened, distance disappeared. The fight shrank to short bursts of movement, sudden flashes of fire, and the heavy presence of steel only meters away. Some Japanese tanks, damaged but not destroyed, crawled forward into the heart of the American positions. Their engines sputtered and growled, stubborn and defiant, pushing them closer than anyone wanted. In these moments, hesitation meant death. Marines rose from cover and moved directly toward the machines, not away from them. Carrying rockets and grenades, they closed the gap through smoke and debris, stepping over shattered equipment and fallen steel. Every movement was deliberate, driven by training and a clear understanding of where armor was weakest. Shaped charge weapons became tools of precision rather than brute force. A single well-placed hit could end a tank instantly. Warheads struck side plates and rear hulls, cutting through metal and igniting fuel. Explosions bloomed outward, violent but controlled, collapsing machines from inside. Flames poured from hatches, and the night swallowed the sound of engines forever. The battlefield was chaotic, but not random. Every Marine knew his role and trusted the men nearby to cover him. Machine gun fire pinned surviving tanks in place, while rocket teams maneuvered. Anti-tank guns shifted targets quickly, crews working under pressure with practiced efficiency. Sherman tanks advanced just enough to finish what smaller weapons had started. Smoke thickened, hanging low over the sand. Visibility dropped between star shell bursts, forcing fighters to rely on instinct and memory of the terrain. The ground was littered with wrecks, some still burning, others silent and dark. Each destroyed tank became both an obstacle and a landmark, shaping the flow of the fight. Japanese crews continued to fight inside their vehicles until the end. Some attempted to fire at point-blank range. Others tried to maneuver through gaps that no longer existed. Their doctrine demanded forward motion, and even in collapse, that impulse remained. Tanks rolled straight into concentrated fire, disappearing in flashes of light and heat. Time lost meaning. Minutes felt stretched, compressed by adrenaline and exhaustion. The line between attack and defense blurred as Marines pushed outward to eliminate remaining threats. Each success revealed another moving shape, another engine sound cutting through the noise. By now, the attack had lost its force, but danger lingered in isolated pockets. A single tank could still cause devastating damage if left unchecked. The Marines pressed on, determined to leave no machine behind that could rise again. The night was burning itself out, but the battle was not yet finished. As the hours dragged on, the battlefield began to change its character. The roar of engines faded into isolated coughs, and then into silence. Gunfire slowed, no longer constant, but sharp and deliberate, aimed at the last moving threats. The night air, once filled with motion, now felt heavy and exhausted. Star shells continued to rise, but each burst revealed fewer targets. Where lines of tanks had once advanced, there were now only twisted hulks scattered across the sand and coral. Some burned fiercely, casting long shadows that stretched toward the sea. Others sat dark and broken, their metal frames still warm, their purpose ended. American positions held firm. Foxholes that had been moments from being overrun now stood surrounded by wreckage. Anti-tank crews reloaded methodically, scanning for movement. Rocket teams checked their remaining ammunition, hands shaking slightly from fatigue rather than fear. Sherman tanks halted, turrets rotating slowly, searching for anything still alive in the ruins. Inland, the Japanese assault had collapsed. Communication between units was gone. Orders could no longer be followed because there was no force left to carry them out. The 9th Tank Regiment, once assembled for a decisive blow, had been reduced to fragments scattered across the night. A few final tanks attempted to break through, moving alone, unsupported, and exposed. They emerged briefly under the light of the flares and were met with immediate fire. Each was destroyed quickly, without ceremony, adding to the growing field of wrecks that marked the limits of the attack. The beach itself bore the scars of the struggle. Sand was torn and blackened. Equipment lay abandoned where it had fallen. Smoke drifted slowly toward the water, carried by a light breeze that felt strangely calm after hours of violence. The sound of the ocean returned, steady and indifferent. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, resistance had effectively ended. 31 Japanese tanks lay destroyed, their regiment broken beyond recovery. The American beachhead remained intact, battered but secure, its defenders still standing where they had been ordered to stand. The night assault had failed. What had been intended as a crushing counterattack had instead become a turning point, draining armored strength that could never be replaced. As darkness gave way to the first hint of dawn, the battlefield settled into an uneasy quiet, filled with smoke, wreckage, and the weight of what had just happened. The sun was rising over Saipan, and the island would never be the same. The first light of dawn spread slowly across Saipan, revealing the full cost of the night. What had been hidden by darkness and star shells now stood exposed in pale morning color. Burned-out tanks lay scattered across the beach and inland approaches, their hulls twisted, their tracks torn free, their guns silent. Smoke rose in thin columns, drifting upward and dissolving into the humid sky. American Marines emerged carefully from their positions. Movements were slow and controlled, shaped by hours of tension and the awareness that danger could still linger. Weapons stayed ready as patrols advanced through the wreckage, stepping around craters and shattered metal. Each destroyed tank was inspected, each shadow treated with caution. The scale of the failed assault became clear with every step forward. The Japanese 9th Tank Regiment no longer existed as a fighting force. Vehicles that had rolled forward with momentum and purpose now formed a broken line of steel stretching across the ground. Some had been destroyed at long range, others at distances so close that scorch marks overlapped the American foxholes. Sherman tanks idled quietly as crews surveyed the field. Their presence underscored the imbalance that had defined the battle. Superior firepower, coordination, and defensive preparation had turned a desperate armored charge into a controlled destruction. The beachhead, once fragile, now felt solid and permanent. The ocean continued its steady rhythm, waves washing against the shore as if nothing had happened. The contrast was stark. Nature moved on, indifferent to the burned machines and torn ground. Above, the sky cleared, and the heat of the day began to build. Inland, no counterattack followed. Japanese resistance withdrew deeper into the island, stripped of armored support. What had been intended as a decisive blow had instead drained strength and momentum at a critical moment. The Marines understood this without needing explanation. The absence of movement spoke louder than any report. As the sun climbed higher, the battlefield settled into a tense calm. Recovery teams began their work. Positions were reinforced. The beachhead expanded carefully, built on the ground that had been held through the night. The wreckage remained where it fell, silent witnesses to the moment when steel and doctrine failed against preparation and resolve. Saipan had revealed its lesson in the early light. Control of the island would not be decided by single bold gestures, but by endurance, coordination, and the ability to adapt under pressure. The night assault was over, but the campaign was far from finished. With the sun fully above the horizon, the meaning of the night became unavoidable. The armored threat that had once loomed over the beachhead was gone. No engines echoed from inland roads. No steel silhouettes moved between the trees. The battlefield no longer felt contested by machines, but by terrain and time. American Marines advanced carefully beyond the wreckage line. Each step inland marked a transition from open sand to broken ground and dense vegetation. The island narrowed movement and vision, forcing progress to slow and methods to change. Tanks were no longer the dominant presence. Infantry now carried the burden forward. The absence of Japanese armor reshaped everything. Defensive positions that might have resisted infantry alone were now vulnerable without steel support. Firepower still mattered, but coordination mattered more. The Marines advanced in measured formations, using the lessons of the night to guide every decision. Fields of fire were planned again. Cover was chosen with care. Nothing was rushed. Behind them, the beachhead continued to transform. Supply lines grew thicker. Equipment moved steadily ashore. The ground that had been nearly lost hours earlier became the foundation for continued advance. The wrecked tanks remained in place, unmoved, forming a grim boundary between what had failed and what now followed. Inland resistance remained determined but constrained. Japanese units fought from prepared positions, relying on camouflage, terrain, and discipline rather than mass or shock. Without armored support, their options narrowed. Each engagement became a test of endurance rather than speed. The psychological impact of the failed night assault lingered on both sides. For the Marines, confidence grew from survival and success. For the defenders, the loss of an entire tank regiment weighed heavily, removing a tool that could not be replaced. Momentum shifted quietly, without announcement, but unmistakably. Heat settled over the island as the day progressed. The smell of burned metal faded, replaced by earth, vegetation, and sweat. The battle no longer roared. It pressed forward steadily, step by step, shaped by choices made under pressure and lessons paid for in the dark hours before dawn. The night of steel and fire had ended. What followed was a slower, harder fight, one that would stretch across the island and demand the same discipline, patience, and resolve that had held the beach when everything threatened to break. The memory of the night lingered as the Marines moved deeper into Saipan. It followed them into the broken hills, the limestone ridges, and the thick vegetation that swallowed sound and distance. The island felt different now. The shock of steel had passed, but its absence carried its own weight. Every burned tank left behind had altered the rhythm of the campaign. Without armored pressure from the defenders, the fighting shifted into a relentless test of positioning and endurance. Progress was measured in short advances, secured ground, and carefully cleared paths. The Marines adapted again, just as they had adapted on the beach, turning experience into instinct. The terrain resisted every movement. Narrow valleys funneled advance routes. Dense growth concealed defensive positions until they were dangerously close. The lessons of the night remained present in every decision. Move with coordination. Control the field of fire. Never assume the ground ahead is empty. The battle no longer announced itself with engines and explosions. It revealed itself suddenly, without warning. Behind the front lines, the wreckage of the failed assault remained untouched. Twisted metal rested under the sun, cooling slowly, becoming part of the island itself. What had been a decisive weapon now served only as a marker of a moment when momentum changed. No orders could undo that loss. No replacement could arrive in time. The campaign pressed on, shaped by that silent shift. Each hill taken, each position cleared, carried the unseen influence of the night when the beachhead held. The Marines did not speak of it as a turning point. They simply moved forward, guided by the certainty earned in darkness. Saipan continued to demand more. More effort, more control, more resolve. The echoes of engines were gone, but the consequences remained, woven into every step inland. The island was still contested, still dangerous, and far from finished. The night attack had failed, but its shadow stretched across the days that followed, shaping the path of the battle as surely as any weapon ever could.